On today's show, we know the Dallas Mavericks need to get a guard. Can they get it in the draft? We've got a bunch of targets, and some of them could work for the Mavs on today's Locked On Mavs.
Stop it! Let's go! Stop! The number one pick will go to the Dallas Mavericks. Cooper Flagg will fly in Dallas.
Dogs, all of us, all five.
You are Locked On Mavs, your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Still can't leave.
Your team every day.
I'm going to get a city like that.
And welcome. You are Locked On to the Dallas Mavericks, your team every day. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member covering the Dallas Mavericks for 10 years. Thanks for being an everydayer, making Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, you can get FanDuel. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets on your first $5 bet wins. Joining me from the Locked On NBA Big Board, the great NBA Big Board, Substack as well, Rafael Barlowe, the best in the business. What you got for me today?
Nothing much, man. We're about 8 days away. I've been talking about these guys since August. I'm ready to see these guys shake Adam Silver's hand and to move on to the 2026 class.
Do you have your 2026 like preliminary big board like ready to go? All those guys have
it's really a waste of time because some guys that everybody likes, they don't pan out with NIL money. Now it's like if you're not a lottery pick, you might as well just go back to school and make more money. So sometimes I do it in the middle of the year just to kind of break up the monotony of talking about the current draft class. But we all know who the top 3 guys are for 2026, and hopefully the Mavs are not in that range.
Yeah. They still have their 2026 pick. Anything can happen. I'm open now doing this show for 8 years. I'm open to anything happening because everything has happened so far.
Yeah, and in the last year, everything has happened in the last 12 months.
It's been wild, including having the number 1 pick. And obviously the Mavs are drafting Cooper Flagg. They're not going to think about trading it. They've already accidentally posted like Cooper Flagg on their website. all those things are in motion right now for the Mavs and for everybody. But I want to talk about players the Mavs could trade back into the draft and get, because there's been some talk about that. There's been some rumors. And the Mavs need a guard. That's the thing. Let's start here. Is the Mavs have needed a guard. We've been talking about trade targets and free agents and minimums and things like that. And there's guys that could come back, and there's guys that have been rumored to the Mavericks. But there's an opportunity in the draft. The Mavs have this new timeline now with Cooper Flagg that if they did get somebody that was younger that came in and could maybe grow with a team, that maybe they take their lumps at the beginning of the season with a young guard and a young Cooper Flagg and with some of the veteran pieces around, and then kind of grow with it. And so I sent you this text today, and I sent it to a couple of guys from the Big Board show. If you were to trade, if you're the Mavericks and you got a late first or like an early second round pick, who would you target? And you gave me a couple of first round picks, and I want to start with Egor Demin. 6'9" guard, 19 years old out of BYU, a 6'10" wingspan. He's a guy, obviously, has great size for a guard, playmaker. He's been talked about as one of the best passers in the draft this year. Why do you think he could be a target for the Mavericks there?
Well, one, I think this draft is going to be such a crapshoot. I think there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of trade. So even when you're like trying to do a mock right now, it is just hard to figure out who's picking for who. I mean, we looked at the trade that happened on Father's Day. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see Desmond Bane going to Orlando and Memphis moving up to number 16. And you'd have to think if Memphis made that trade, they already have some guys in mind that they're targeting that they like. So with that being said, I think it's going to be a wild night. I mean, the big domino of Kevin Durant hasn't fallen yet. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of teams that have picks now. Like, for example, the Nets have 4 first-round picks. I can't see them bringing 4 rookies in the training camp. So with that being said,
in our mock draft that drops today, our Nets, the Locked On Nets guys, before they dipped and they left Locked On Nets, they had 6 first round picks in that mock.
Yeah, could you imagine bringing 6 rookies into training camp?
Wild.
So, a lot of redundancy there. So with that being said, I just think there's some guys that are projected to go in the lottery that could fall. And Demin could be one. He's somewhat polarizing. There's some teams that I've heard that really like him because of his size and his playmaking. But there are other teams that are like, yeah, he doesn't shoot it well. Historically, he hasn't shot the ball well. There's times where he's not aggressive or not assertive. Sometimes he struggles with ball pressure. But when I look at what Demin brings to the table, I feel like he was exactly what Dallas needed in the second half of the year when they didn't have like a distributor and everybody that was on the floor was a scorer. And so I feel like they needed a guy like Egor who was like, all right, I just want to set the table. I want to get you your shots. Dinwiddie, I want to make sure you get your shots. Brandon Williams, Jaden Hardy. I mean, second half of the year, the Mavs just needed healthy bodies, but he's very unselfish and he has good positional size. And he's the type of guy that with his passing that I think a lot of people would love to play with.
Yeah, a bunch of Mavericks fans cringed when you said Dinwiddie needed to get his shots. They just all recoiled, sitting in their seats at home.
They loved him a year ago.
We talked about true. We've talked about Cooper Flagg potentially playing the 2 because Jason Kidd brought that up on an interview recently.
Did he say his name? Or did he say
he still calls him the kid from Duke? He still says the kid from. I think he was on with Fox 4 the other day, and he called him the kid from Duke then too.
So creative,
just making the rounds. But it would be wild to see like two 6'9" guards in certain lineups with Demin and Cooper Flagg, and then you could run PJ Washington as the smallest guy in a lineup. Not a lot of shooting in that lineup at all, but the Mavs could run it. What the struggles for Egor Demin have been, you mentioned the shooting. I saw a couple of people, I think you and somebody else mentioned the ball handling for him was a problem. How does a guy that's incredible playmaker, passer, why is ball handling like a potential struggle for him?
Well, just because he's 6'9", and sometimes you can put a smaller defender on him to get in his airspace and make him work. So, imagine him bringing the ball up the court against Jose Alvarado or a Drew Holiday, or even just a team that their second unit guard. Yes, yeah. But like TJ McConnell, like if a team has a guy that's in their second unit and his job is to just be aggressive and push the tempo and be an irritant. Those are the type of guys that give Egor some trouble. So I know this offseason he's really worked on his ball handling, but I think that's like the biggest concern outside of the shooting is, can he bring the ball up the court against some of these pesky, smaller defenders that have given him some trouble in the past?
Yeah, interesting. He'd be another really young guy for the Mavs out of their court too. What's your grasp on where you think he'd go in the draft? Like, where is he being mocked right now? Where do you think the Mavs would have to trade into?
I wish I knew, man. I think his range could be from like 7 to 20. I really do. I mean, he's got a green room invite right now, but he's polarizing because, like I said, there are teams that are just like, hey, man, he's 6'9", he's the best passer in the draft. We can work with that. But then there's teams that, may be concerned about some of the things I've mentioned. He wasn't a really good shooter from the free throw line. He wasn't efficient from deep. And he's had some struggles against, really aggressive, smaller guards. So I think he has a pretty wide range. I mean, this was like a reach, like best case scenario. Mm-hmm. But I guess it depends on where the Mavs end up getting, what range they can get into if they can't get in the first round. But this was just kind of like, best case scenario.
There's Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma, the 6'3" guard. People think he may go top 5 or at least top 10. Yep. There's the Yakuchunas guard from Illinois. Yep. And then I guess maybe Jace Richardson. Is Egor Demin like the third point guard, you think?
I mean, I think Egor would go ahead of Jace just because Jace measured out at 6 foot and he didn't play the point at Michigan State. I think Jace is the type of guard that is best suited to play next to a guy like Luka Doncic, where he doesn't have to play the point, but he can shoot and he can guard the smaller point guards and then just be like the guy that he's going to knock down the open shot. He's going to make the mid-range, pull up. He's just going to be efficient and smart. I don't know if he's really a lead guard. He didn't really get a chance to show it at Michigan State. And my question is, did Michigan State put him in the best position to succeed because he wasn't expected to be one and done? Or did Michigan State hold him back? And I guess that's kind of like the multi-million-dollar question. But I would have Egor ahead of him.
Yeah. So the Mavs could maybe, if he starts dropping and we see, all right, he may make it to the 20s. The Mavs could trade back, trade back in, get the 20th pick or something, and all of a sudden the Mavs could have a guard that could answer one of their questions. Coming up, let's talk about another guard that could answer the Mavs question here. Nolan Traore. Another one where people are all over the place on. You had him as high as 5 before the season. Let's talk about what he would bring to the Mavericks. Talk about that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Mavs brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. We're talking about the draft right now, and they have all kinds of things you can do for the draft. This has not changed. It's still one of the funniest things I've ever seen on FanDuel. Cooper Flagg to be the number 1 pick, minus 100,000. You have to put down $100,000 to win $100 in order to get money on that. That's pretty funny to me. To go number 3, this one has changed recently. VJ Edgecombe minus 135. Ace Bailey plus 300. Trey Johnson plus 410. Dylan Harper to drop all the way there, be wild, plus 1900. And Jeremiah Fierce, we just talked about, plus 9,500. That's a wild one to go 3. All kinds of good stuff like that, and WNBA stuff as well with our Dallas Wings. You can put money down, and if you're confident in something, it's a perfect time to sign up. If you're new, head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If that wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Please gamble responsibly.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, what we call our listeners listening every day. We appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. We've got the Locked On Mavs Insiders text line, 214-643-8637. You can get that and subscribe to that. It helps us out a lot. We send any rumor that I ever see about the Mavericks, I'll text it right to you and give you my thoughts, Isaac as well. And you should go subscribe to NBA Big Board, because Rafael Barlowe, like I said, best in the business, doing a bunch of stuff. Saw you just hit a milestone on subscribers, so shout out to you. And it's incredible, worth it for sure. So go check out NBA Big Board if you're interested in the draft and some of these guys that we've been talking about. So we've been talking about guys the Mavs could trade back into the draft and get. We mentioned Egor Demin from BYU. Now Nolan Traore is another one that you sent me when I asked you this question. 6'3" guard, 19 years old, from France, 6'8" wingspan, and everybody keeps talking about his first step, that like it's just incredible. What did you see from Traore when you scouted him?
I like the tools. I like the tools. I mean, he had me stuttering for a second. I like the tools. He's got decent size. He's quick. And a year ago at this time, everybody saw him as a top 5 pick. He had a phenomenal Adidas Next Generation tournament where he had a game where he had 45 points against Kasparas Jakachonis, who's projected to, be maybe a late lottery pick. He led that tournament in scoring, but he's not just a scorer. He led the FIBA Eurobasket U18s in assists a few months later at 9 assists per game. And then he had a game at the Nike Hoop Summit, which is a big event for NBA scouts, and he had 18 points in the game there. Got off to a slow start, which I think is expected. He was an 18-year-old playing professionally, playing the toughest position. He just got off to a really slow start, and it just seems like the consensus has just kind of just dropped him. And I feel like the adjustments that he's made in the second half of the season have been overlooked because everyone is still just, they just remember how much he struggled like pre-January. But I think that he's still the same guy that everybody liked. It's just he had an adjustment. And my counter to that is if I would have taken any of the other guards that are projected to go ahead of him, and if I put him in college and put some of those guys in a professional league in France, I think they would have had similar adjustments or just similar struggles at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting when some of these guys are put in completely different contexts. That has to be the hardest part of scouting. Is just like, especially even like different college conferences and different things that coaches are asking them to do. You know what I mean? Like it's so different, and it's not an even thing across the board like it is if you're watching a bunch of NBA players. Okay, they're all playing against NBA talent every night for them, unless you're playing the Nets, I guess. And then there's all kinds of different changes. Who's healthy, who's not. But with this, it's like you're playing in different leagues, playing with 30-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds. Like it's all over the place.
But I feel good about my recent evaluation where I have him at 10, and I think I'm higher than the consensus. And it just came out, maybe a couple hours ago that he got a green room invite, and so the NBA GMs or executives invited him and his family to the green room, which means that, they think that he's going to be at least a top 20 pick. So far, I think only 19 invitations have been out. So I feel a little comfortable with me ranking him inside the top 10. Not saying he'll go that high, but his name is all over the place. I mean, I've seen him like 25. I've seen him like late 20s, early second round. But I think he's the same guy that everyone loved at this time a year ago.
It only takes one team and probably one guy in a scouting department to go, listen, we all had him top 5 a year ago. Let's bet on the talent. Let's bet on what we all saw. To me, like just the explaining who he is and reading up about him, it sounded like a De'Aaron Fox. Would you compare him to that, or is there another player whose style you would maybe compare him to?
I like the De'Aaron Fox comparison because I just think it's so lazy that everyone that is making comparisons is only comparing him to other French guards and they're comparing him to the ones that didn't pan out. But I just think he has a different mentality than a lot of the other French guards. Most of them are like kind of pass first, and everyone loved their size, and they were kind of like connectors, like Frank Ntilikina and so on. But Traore, he likes to get downhill. If he's De'Aaron Fox, that's a win. You're talking about a guy that has good size, that is fast. The shooting comes and goes. I mean, Fox has had years where he shot 37%. He's had years where he shot 29%. And that's one of the concerns with Traore is just the consistency with his shooting. And he's a little predictable. If he's going right, he's going to the bucket. If he's going left, it's a pull-up jumper. And so that's one of the big concerns. But best case scenario for him would be De'Aaron Fox.
I love some of the sites. They're trying to like redo the comps, and like the Ringer had Nico Mannion and 8% taller Facu Campazzo, and I don't know why this made me laugh really hard.
Wow.
I read that.
Wow.
Jeff T goes like, okay, that was another one. I was like, okay, that one actually makes sense. The other two, I was like, okay, you lost me. I think you lost me on that one.
Yeah, these comps are just all over the place. But Cooper Flagg has the best comps because he has the widest range of comps from Tatum to Garnett to AK-47.
Yeah, the Cooper Flagg ones on the Ringer were Scottie Pippen, the biggest one, Tatum, Andre Karolinko, AK-47. We talked about him a lot. Nick Batum and Sean Marion. It's like, okay, you can kind of see that. If he goes a certain way with his development or a certain way in the other direction, you could see that.
The widest range ever.
Well, because he can just do so many things. We talked about it a million times. It's kind of awesome. We did an episode, Rafael and I did an episode about Cooper Flagg a couple weeks ago, so go check out that one if you missed that one. You didn't send me this guy, but Walter Clayton from Florida is one that you got quoted on the Mavs subreddit. They're like, Rafael Barlowe said the Mavericks could trade back in. And then all the comments underneath were, let's get Walter Clayton. Let's get Walter Clayton. Tell me about him and why he wasn't one you suggested.
Walter Clayton scares me. You know why? Because, and this could be a bad comparison, he might be like Sebastian Napier a few years ago. Napier won a championship.
Shabazz Napier?
Shabazz, yeah.
I was thinking Sebastian Telfair.
I kind of mixed up. But Napier won a championship. Everyone loved him, like LeBron, kind of like forced.
He did.
I think Miami to draft him, and then he dipped and went to Cleveland. I do think like there is some recency bias, but I mean, Walter Clayton had a really good year. I mean, he had a really good year statistically. He made some big shots in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if he's really a one. I think he's just more so like a combo, but he's a shot maker. He's a bucket. I think he's more so of a shot maker than a shooter, if that makes sense. Like he can shoot, but it's more a lot of rhythm shots, pull-up jumpers, step backs. So I like him, but yeah, I just think he's similar to like Brandon Williams. And I'm a big Brandon Williams guy. And so to me, I would much rather have Brandon Williams than Walter Clayton Jr.
Well, you could have both, and you just have two Brandon Williams.
And then I just think like you need a table setter at some point. Like you can't have a lot of combo guards, in my opinion.
It's true. Well, they'll just have two rim running centers. They'll have two bucket getter guards. They'll have two versatile wings. It's like you just get the Mavs just have two of everything and not
then
one
Cooper
of
Flagg.
The one thing that
a little bit of everything else.
The one thing that Cooper Flagg and AD will just fill in all the gaps everywhere else. That's how it's going to work out. Yeah, he's the one that got brought up the most. Coming up, let's talk about your second round picks. If the Mavs can get a second round pick, which teams have bought before. So let's talk about that and the players they could get in the second round coming up. All right, I'm here with Rafael Barlowe, Locked On NBA Big Board, and the Big Board Substack. Go check it out. Great stuff every day on that. I'm finding myself going there every single day. You got a couple of second round picks you sent me when I said, all right, if the Mavericks get back into the draft, who could they pick? One of them, Jamir Watkins, 6'6" wing from Florida State. Going to be just under 24 years old at the time of the draft, so definitely a little older. He'll be like, I don't know, 6 years older than Cooper Flagg at the time of the draft. 6'11" wingspan, though. Why did you suggest Jamir Watkins?
You know, if you listen to everything that Nico Harrison said after the Luka Doncic trade, it's more like defense, and he talked about the timeline. I think the timeline has changed since, they won the lottery, but Jamir fits, the role of a guy that can come in, contribute right away. He's a good defender. He's a good passer. I think last year he led Florida State in almost every statistical category. It was similar to Cooper Flagg's year. He led him in scoring, rebounding, may have been tied in assists, steals. And the knock on him is that he's just not a good outside shooter. He came back to school this year to, I guess, prove to teams he can shoot. He upped the volume, but the shooting percentage was, still in the low 30s. But I like him as an NBA player because he's got some shades of Naji Marshall, a connector, a guy that is tough, competitive. You can put him on the other team's best player, and he's going to be physical. Comes from I guess like a tough background, and sometimes it shows on the court that he's just not afraid of the moment, not afraid of anybody. And at the combine, he was picking up full court. And so I think when you're looking at a guy that can provide defense and connective passing and, downhill slashing, like he got to the foul line a lot. He's a guy that's going to attack the rim and put pressure on the rim. And if Kid wants to get creative, I think you can see some lineups where he could be like the one, because he's a natural passer and he's aggressive on both ends of the floor. So I really like him a lot for Dallas.
Yeah, they played Naji at the one last year a couple times. It was mostly out of necessity, but they definitely did.
And 30-point games. Almost had a triple-double against, I forgot the team it was, but I was there.
I blocked it out of my brain too.
Just like Sunday. I remember that much.
Just like our guy Theo Pinson had that triple-double. I blocked that one out of my brain too at the end of that season a couple years ago. This is the only like non-point guard or guard that you suggested. And I found that interesting. But the Mavs could make another move for a guard. They could trade for their guard, and then they get back into the draft and want a cost-controlled younger player to fit, the other timeline. I do find it interesting. He'd be 6 years older than Cooper Flagg, but yeah.
And he had another year eligibility, but he's a guy that I'm thinking about. Just if the Mavs have Kyrie and you have another big guard that can bring the ball up the court and let Kyrie run the offense, where Kyrie doesn't have to like get picked up full court, but another big guard that can handle, that is aggressive, that's not going to settle for jump shots. And if you have some shooters around him, he can put the pressure on the defense. So like I said, I like what he brings to the table as far as his size and his toughness and on the defensive end, which, is very valued in Dallas right now.
And he's like going to be a second round pick or definitely like in the 40s, 50s.
I mean, I think so, but he could be a guy that teams like. I remember talking to a team about him a few months ago, and they were like, he's the guy that we can throw in the playoffs right now and put on the other team's best player for, a few minutes per game, and he can be a disruptor. And that's what they liked in him. So I think there may be other teams that may feel the same way.
Interesting. Yeah, the sometimes when those players are too old, they go later in the draft, and then you get somebody that's really good and can play right away because people are scared off by the size or by the age. Kobe Brea, 6'5" guard from Kentucky, gonna be about 22 and a half, 6'5" wingspan. And you just said shooter, just shooter. And the Mavs could use some shooting because there are some people that pitch me Klay Thompson trades, and I start looking at the roster after Klay Thompson is gone, and the shooting is a big concern if Klay misses games or gets traded in some way.
Yeah, Kobe Brea is a sniper. He was at Kentucky this year, spent his first 4 years at Dayton. Last year, not this past season, but the year before, he shot like 49% from three. Like he's automatic. He had a down year shooting and he shot 43% from three. He has good size, shot 91% from the foul line, limited in what he can do, but he's the guy that if he's on the floor and he's in the corner, you're not leaving the corner man. So I think for him, he'll be able to provide outside shooting and gravity. And when I look at the Mavs roster, like you said, they need some shooting outside of Klay Thompson. I mean, obviously Kyrie can shoot. Hardy, if you look at the numbers, I think he's like 38% shooter.
Yeah, Hardy has been a good shooter.
Hardy can shoot. I still see him more as a scorer than a shooter, but I just think in the Mavs situation, you're going to need snipers, and so Brea could be a guy that would be available in the second round that I think would be worth trading up for.
Yeah, 2023-24 for Dayton. He played 33 games, came off the bench on all of them before. Shot 6 threes a game, 49.8% from three.
Yes.
Insane.
I mean, that's incredible.
Led the country. And then led the country again this year at Kentucky. took just under 6 a game and shot 43.5%. Like he dipped to 43.5. Are you concerned that he dipped from 50 to 43?
Yeah, man. But it's crazy that he's a second round pick. As much as, shooting is valued in today's NBA, you know what he brings to the table. You know that he has a defined role. And I think he could be a guy that could be a steal. The question is, can he defend? Is he going to be a guy that if he's in a playoff setting, is he going to be the guy that teams target and hunt on the other end? But like I said, he can shoot. And sometimes having a defined skill set is what gets you on the floor.
He did measure at 6'6", but he has kind of a negative wingspan. Is that what scared people off? Is the defense?
I just think sometimes when they have 100 games of film on you, that it's easier to just kind of pick your flaws. But I like him. Like I said, he has a purpose, and if he's on the floor, you're not leaving him open in the corner, which opens everything up for guys like AD and Cooper. So, I just like to visualize it. So if it's like a Cooper AD pick and roll, which I don't know, that could be your 4-5, it could be your 3-4, it could be your 2-5. There's a lot of options there. But with shooting, and we saw it, last year that with shooting, it just opens so many things up for like your lob threats.
Yeah, the Mavs could use it for sure. The last one you suggested to me, or the last second round pick you suggested to me, Tyrese Proctor, Cooper Flagg's point guard, 6'5", went to Duke, going to be 21, 6'7" wingspan. He played with multiple top 15 picks in Conkinipple and Common Malawatch, and obviously Cooper Flagg. Why is he not
Lively?
Yeah, why is he not going higher?
I think it's a situation where he's had so many different roles. When he was a freshman at Duke, he was in the class that had Lively. Everyone saw him as a point guard. And actually, Duke turned the corner that year when they moved him to the point, and Lively got healthy after having a calf injury. And Duke they just turned the corner. And there's a tweet that, social media doesn't forget anything. But he had a game in his freshman year, their last game of the year against Tennessee, where he looked like a plus level shot maker. He was knocking down tough shots. He was scoring in isolation. And then unfortunately, we just didn't see that again. And then he got moved to an off the ball role, more so of a connector. But he's a guy that's solid. He can play the 1, he can play the 2, he can knock down shots. He's not going to be impressive and wow you. I think of him as playing maybe a similar role to what Dante Exum played. Doesn't have Exum's first step, but sometimes Exum was bringing the ball up the court. Sometimes Exum was playing 3. And I think with Proctor, he would provide additional ball handling, outside shooting, and just steadiness. Sometimes you just need steady guard play at the end of your rotation. And I think that's what he could provide.
That's what the Mavs need right now. Like what you just described is a guy that, 6'5", he's played next to guard sometimes. He's played as the point guard sometimes. The Mavs want a guy that can do that. He's played with both Lively and with Cooper Flagg. That's a huge positive, I would think. And if they could jump in and buy a pick or get a second round pick somehow, that to me was the one that stood out as the ones that you mentioned. Is like, all right, that seems possible, and I could see how Nico would sell it. This guy, played with Cooper, played with Dereck Lively, and he's the guard. He's the guard that we need that we're going to add to this young core. Like I can just see him making that pitch.
Yeah, and if he really had like the flashes he showed as a freshman, if he has those in his game still, and that wasn't just a flash in the pan, and the Mavs can unlock something, then they could really have something special there. Because his freshman year, there was times where I thought he was going to be Duke's best NBA prospect, and that was with Lively on the team.
He also wore Jaws shoes, so he's kind of Nike. He's got Nike. Does he have any Nike ties? Is that
Duke's a Nike school, so
always a positive for the Mavs.
And Kyrie's a Dookie himself, so that would be what four Duke guys on the roster.
It would be. Isaac would start like tearing his hair out a little bit because he's a big North Carolina guy, and he would just start like, how are we getting all these Duke guys? Okay, you sent me a wild card that I found fascinating. Hanson Yang, tell me about him.
Me and my brother James, we are the Yang gang. We've been high on Hanson Yang for a while. Very skilled. I mean, he's a massive interior presence. I think he's just
center, right?
Yes, 7'2", like 250 pounds. I hate making the comparisons because Donnie Nelson told me this a long time ago. Donnie Nelson said, look, if you ever make a player comparison, you better stand on it, because even if you say shades or hints, people are only going to hear the name. So I'm putting myself out here.
It's fair.
But Hanson Yang has some Alperen Şengün and Nikola Jokic in his game as far as just craftiness in the paint, like an old school big that plays with his back to the basket, has counter moves on top of counter moves, but is a phenomenal passer. Maybe not like point forward like Jokic, but he is a phenomenal passer. He was at the combine, and like if you just type in like his highlights from the combine, I'm sure the first play that's going to come up is like this pass he whipped from the elbow that had some crazy backspin on it and hit the cutter. He led the CBA in blocks. He's skilled, but like I said, old school. The questions are, does he have the foot speed to keep up with the pace of today's NBA? I think he moves a lot better than people give him credit for. I talked to some scouts at the combine, and they were kind of giving me a hard time because they knew how much I liked him, and they were telling me they didn't like him on film, but they left, just impressed with how he looked. Just seeing him up close. I think he's a wild card. Again, if Zach Edey can play in the NBA, whether it's 20 minutes a game, I think Hanson Yang could play. He first caught my attention when he played against France in like a U18 tournament, and he absolutely just gave Alex Sarr fits. And Alex Sarr was the number 2 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
He's physical, and just counter move on top of counter move in the paint. And at the minimum, he's going to sell a lot of tickets. He's going to sell a lot of tickets. If he plays for the Texas Legends, that arena is going to be packed in Frisco. But I believe in his talent. I'm not just talking about him as a gimmick and a guy that's, promotional tool. I really believe in his talent. And he's with Clutch, so he has the same agent as Dereck Lively. So I think they would probably have some chemistry. Anthony Davis too. So I think there could, there could be something there also.
I just saw the pass from the combine, and I'm with you. It's an incredible touch on that pass.
And when I think of it, I'm like, all right, the Mavs don't need 2 lob threats anymore. So you're probably going to need just a traditional back to the basket center. And I'm not saying he's going to play a lot of minutes. I mean, to me, like if he can be Zubac, like a Zubac type guy where he just rebounds and just, Zubac was like led the NBA in like hook shots made this year or something like that.
Yeah,
but if
maybe not this year's Zubac, but like the first couple years of him.
Yeah, this year Zubac was unlocked because of James Harden. But if he could be like that type of guy, but more so of a player that you can give the ball to in the post and say, hey, go get me a bucket, dump it down, and just kind of change the pace up. I think he can do that. Like I said, just the concerns are, can he keep up with the pace? And is he going to be a guy that teams target? But to me, if Zach Edey can play, he can play in the NBA also.
Yeah, this was a pitch you specifically mentioned. You're like, if Gafford gets moved. Yeah, if the Mavs do decide to move on from Gafford, they're all of a sudden needing a center. This is one that you piqued my interest. You called Dereck Lively being really good in the NBA a couple years ago. And
do you remember when I was on a show and they asked me? It was like right after the draft, and the first question was, "Did we just draft another Moses Brown?" It was on a local show here, and they actually I was in studio, and after the draft, they just kind of looked at the numbers. And they were like, did we just draft Moses Brown again? Which is funny because Moses Brown was very good for the Mavs this year when Lively and all those guys was hurt.
That's true. He was.
But yeah, it was, hopefully I'm right. I think I'll be loved by Mavericks fans if Hanson Yang is good. And I got another pick right. But I do like Hanson Yang though.
You should be loved by Mavericks fans anyway. NBA Big Board. Also check out Locked On NBA Big Board. Great stuff from Rafael Barlowe all the time. We'll be back tomorrow. Isaac will also have his own trade up targets that he'll have today. So check out that episode. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.